one of the things that I appreciated is like what I would call almost like this craftsman's approach to building products. So the point you made about the MVP, for example, that you didn't take this approach of like just ship something as quickly as possible. That is like by far, in my opinion, it's like a very dominant kind of mantra in the tech community. And it's also interesting to see that for a product like this, everyone's like, "What's your one line pitch?" It's like, okay, you know, uh, spaced repetition software for learning Chinese or flashcards for Chinese. If you say any of these things, it it's like I think the reaction, especially as someone that's kind of like tried a bunch of these tools, is like, okay, whatever. It's
Hmm.
like there's tons of those. But I mentioned this to you at one point, which was like Hack Chinese has a bunch of these like 2-3% improvements on anything else that exists. And then when you keep adding them up, they create like a very different experience around learning Chinese. So, obviously I'm a big fan because I wrote about your software. I've referred several customers to it. But I think even part of this interview that was interesting for me is like you just have a bit of a different view on building these things, which is not as rushed. It takes into account some of the softer details that you can't like economically justify right away. And I think there's a whole class of products that I've started to think about that kind of fall into this category, which is like when it's done right, you just know like it works. But getting to that point, I found is really difficult and requires a lot of intuition because it's not the kind of thing you can like. I think for some of the features, it's kind of you can ask your users, but I feel like there's a whole set. Correct me if I'm wrong on this, but like my feeling with Hack Chinese was that you had intuition about a lot of features that if you just poll people asking them what they want, it doesn't necessarily come out. I'm not sure if I'm assuming that, but what do you think of that in general? Like, of the features you built for Hack Chinese, how much of it was intuition for you? How much of it was listening to your users? And like, how do you think about when to listen to your users, when to follow your intuition?
Yeah, um, definitely, definitely what you said. When I told people, "Oh, I'm going to be building a space repetition tool for Chinese," you're leaving your like your career to build something that exists like a million times over. Like that's crazy. You're right. It's it was a challenge. So I think to me, one of the things that I had going for me, and I definitely recommend if you look for this as a starting point if you're looking to build any product, is are you somebody who has that pain point? I see oftentimes people in different forums or whatever say like, I'm looking to build a startup. I'll be, or whatever. Are there any problems out there that need solving? And it's like, good luck. This is so hard. This is so incredibly hard. If you're not solving a problem that you don't have, that you can't immediately feel like the visceral like, this is annoying. How are you going to drive that development? What are you going to build? Are you going to listen to like other people? Like, maybe that works. I'm sure it does in times, but for me, that was, I mean, that has carried me at least 50%, if not significantly more of the way from getting this thing off the ground was I had a issue. I needed it solved. Nothing out there was solving it for me in the way that I wanted it to. So that was important. Um, I do listen to customers a lot in terms of the direction of something. Some things are very easy. If a customer says like, "Oh, my school uses this textbook. Can you get it online?" That's a no-brainer. Of course, yes, we can. Other times, some customers, some students have requests that are I would put them in the category of like the Microsoft approach, which is maybe the Microsoft from like the 90s or the 2000s approach, which was like, oh, like I can see that this thing works in this way. It would be cool if I could also do it these 8 other ways. And I don't think it's always wrong to add the options to do certain things as like maybe like an advanced feature here or there. But um, I think that if you can narrow down the options for any particular question you might have or way you might configure something to like two, to one is best. If there's a best practice and it's the dominant choice all of the time, don't even give the other options. If there's maybe a reason they might want to do one or two other things, you can add those in. But uh, complexity is one of the main so one of the main tools that is kind of a competitor, Anki. That's used all over the place to learn almost anything. They have a 140-page user guide, and so hey, they're incredibly successful. They have a better business than HackChinese at the point. I'm not saying anything bad about them. Um, I've used them a lot in the past, but I think there is a market for people who are not willing to go through that learning curve and just want best practices given to them. Um, one of the if I think most of the people these days who create Chinese learning, I'm not sure what the word is, but what they will create is a resource. Like, here is content that you can study somehow. Like, here are either some videos or some grammar patterns or lists of things that you can learn, um, or ideas on how you should be studying, all that sort of stuff. That's all awesome. I love all that stuff. I enjoy reading those things, but not everybody does. They just want progress. They just want like the best cases handed to them on a silver platter and are willing to pay for it. And so that's a thing I try to keep in my mind when I'm figuring out what direction to build HackChinese in. Like, sure, you could go read about like the optimal order to learn this, then that, then these things or whatever, and that's all cool. But if you miss that article and you don't do it in that way, or even if you do want to, how much time do you have to spend managing that whole process? Um, that tool Anki, they have spent so much time making sure their algorithm is like algorithmically perfect, in like really, really high quality. Like, they're probably incredibly, incredibly efficient. Like, you will see this review exactly when you should, not a moment too soon, not a moment too late. Our algorithm is probably not as good as that. Unquestionably, it's not as good as that. And where we focus our time instead are on um, all the other like sort of polish of the tool, of making it easy to start, making it as little, hopefully zero management time as possible. Whereas with some of the more advanced tools, you need to really you need like a master's degree to like figure out how to get all the value from it. Whereas like, okay, maybe we are 90% as efficient as those, but almost everyone's going to be at that 90% efficiency all the time without any thinking, because we're doing all the math for you. You don't, we show you the statistics of why we show you stuff in HackChinese, but you don't even need to know or look or care. It's just going to happen if you just use it with some regularity. But our landing page right now, which I agree with it now. It says learn thousands of Chinese words this year, and that's really it. You don't also need to learn, you know, other methods or like how to figure out how to manage your time, all this other stuff. It's like, no, you just need to put like 10 minutes in a day, and by the end of the year you'll have a pretty awesome vocabulary, which is like the one thing that we focus on at the moment.